An elderly widow finds two German Shepherd puppies freezing to death on her doorstep on the coldest night of the year. She brings them inside, wraps them in blankets, and saves their lives. But when she wakes up the next morning, her house is surrounded by police cars. Armed officers are shouting through megaphones. Helicopters circle overhead. They're treating her like a dangerous criminal. And when they finally tell her why, the truth will leave you speechless. Because those weren't just puppies. They were something far more valuable, and the people who lost them will stop at nothing to get them back. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button because we're building a community that believes in the impossible. The town of Pinewood, Montana, was the kind of place where winter didn't just arrive. It invaded. It came down from the mountains like an army, brutal and unforgiving, turning the world into a frozen wasteland where survival was a daily battle. The locals knew the signs. When the temperature dropped below zero and stayed there, when the wind howled through the pines with a sound like screaming, when the snow fell so thick you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. That's when you stayed inside. That's when you made sure your firewood was stacked high and your pantry was full, because once a blizzard hit, you were on your own. Margaret Hartley had lived through 68 Montana winters. She knew the rules. She respected the cold. But on this particular December night, as the storm began to rage outside her small farmhouse on the edge of town, she was about to break the most important rule of all. Never open your door during a blizzard. Never go outside. Never bring in something you don't understand. She was sitting by her fireplace, wrapped in her late husband's old wool blanket, listening to the wind shake the windows when she heard it. A sound that cut straight through the storm. A sound that didn't belong. It was faint at first, almost lost in the chaos. But then it came again. Sharper, more desperate, a whimper, high-pitched and terrified, the sound of something small and alive and dying. Margaret's hands tightened on the blanket. She knew that sound. She'd raised dogs her whole life. German Shepherds mostly. Working dogs. Loyal, intelligent, fearless. Her last shepherd, Duke, had passed away 3 months ago, and the silence in the house had been unbearable ever since. She'd told herself she was too old to take on another dog. Too tired. Too alone. But that sound outside her door, that desperate, pleading cry, it shattered every wall she'd built. She stood up, her joints protesting, and walked to the window. The world outside was a whiteout, pure chaos. She couldn't see more than a few feet. But the sound came again, closer now, right outside her front door. And then she heard it. Not one voice. Two puppies, crying in the storm. Didn't think. She didn't calculate. She just moved. Her husband, Tom, would have called it her fatal flaw, that inability to walk past something suffering. She grabbed her heaviest coat from the hook by the door, the one with the fur-lined hood that Tom had bought her 20 years ago. Her fingers fumbled with the deadbolt. The metal was cold, so cold it burned. She took a breath, braced herself, and pulled the door open. The wind hit her like a fist. It stole her breath, filled her lungs with ice. Snow swirled into her house in a blinding vortex. And there on her porch, huddled against the side of her wooden rocking chair, were two of the most pitiful creatures she'd ever seen. They were German Shepherd puppies. Couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 weeks old. Their fur, which should have been thick and fluffy, was matted down with ice. Actual ice. Frozen solid. Their little bodies were shaking so violently she could see it even through the storm. One of them, slightly larger with darker markings, had its eyes squeezed shut. The other, smaller with lighter tan coloring, looked up at her, with eyes that were barely focused. Clouded. Fading. "Oh my God!" Margaret breathed. "Oh my God, babies, what happened to you?" She didn't wait for an answer. She crouched down, her knees screaming in protest, and scooped them both up. They were so cold. So impossibly cold. Like holding blocks of ice shaped like living things. The smaller one didn't even react to being picked up. The larger one let out a weak whimper that broke her heart into pieces. Margaret turned and stumbled back inside, kicking the door shut behind her. The sudden absence of wind felt like silence, though the storm still raged outside. She carried the puppies straight to the fireplace, where the fire was burning strong and hot. She laid them down on the thick rug, right in front of the flames. For a moment she just stared. They weren't moving much. Their breathing was shallow, rapid. She could see their little ribs moving under their frozen fur. The smaller one's lips were blue. Actually blue. She'd never seen that on a dog before. "Okay," she said aloud, her voice shaking. "Okay, Margaret, think. Think." She'd done this before. Years ago, when Tom was still alive, they'd found a neighbor's dog that had fallen through ice. She remembered what the vet had said. Warm them slowly. Too fast, and you could shock their system. Get the wet off them. Check for frostbite. Keep them calm. Margaret moved with a speed that surprised her. She grabbed every towel from her linen closet. 4 thick bath towels that she'd been saving for guests who never came anymore. She knelt back down by the puppies and began to carefully, gently pat them dry. The ice in their fur was starting to melt, which was good, but it meant they were lying in cold water, which was bad. "Come on, babies," she murmured as she worked. "Come on, stay with me." The larger puppy, the one with the darker markings, responded to her voice. Its eyes opened just a crack. It tried to lift its head. Margaret felt a surge of hope. "That's it," she encouraged. "That's it, sweetheart. You're safe now." She dried them as best she could, then wrapped each one in a separate dry towel, creating little burrito bundles with just their faces poking out. The smaller one still hadn't moved much, and that terrified her. She held it close to her chest, sharing her body heat, while keeping the larger one pressed against her side. After about 10 minutes, she felt it. The smaller puppy shivered. Not the violent, uncontrollable shaking from before, but a proper, strong shiver. Its body's way of generating heat. Margaret nearly cried with relief. "There you are," she whispered. "There you are." She kept them like that for almost an hour, just holding them, talking to them softly, letting the fire's warmth seep into their frozen bodies. Slowly, gradually, they came back to life. The larger puppy started wiggling in its towel. The smaller one opened its eyes fully for the first time, revealing beautiful dark brown eyes that looked up at Margaret with something like trust. When she finally felt confident enough to set them down, Margaret went to her kitchen and warmed up some milk. Not too hot, just lukewarm. She found an old medicine dropper in her bathroom cabinet and brought it back to the living room. She settled onto the floor, her back against the couch, and carefully fed each puppy a few drops at a time. The larger one drank eagerly, its little pink tongue lapping at the dropper. The smaller one was more hesitant, but after a moment it drank too. Margaret felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't even try to stop them. "You're going to be okay," she told them. "Both of you, I promise." As she sat there on her living room floor in the middle of a blizzard, feeding milk to 2 orphaned puppies, Margaret made a decision. She'd keep them, both of them. She didn't know where they'd come from or how they'd ended up on her porch, but that didn't matter. They were hers now. She'd name them. She'd raise them. She'd train them just like she'd trained Duke and all the shepherds before him. The larger one she'd call Bear, because even as a puppy, even half-frozen and near death, there was something solid about him, something unbreakable. The smaller one she'd call Scout, because those eyes, those beautiful, watchful eyes, missed nothing. Bear and Scout, she said aloud, testing the names. Both puppies looked up at her. Welcome home. By midnight, both puppies had eaten a little bit of the softened kibble Margaret had mixed with warm water. They'd drunk more milk. They'd even managed to stumble around the living room a bit, exploring with that clumsy curiosity that only puppies have. Bear was definitely the bolder of the two, investigating every corner while Scout stayed closer to Margaret, leaning against her leg. Margaret checked them over more thoroughly now that they were warm and responsive. No obvious injuries. Their paw pads were pink and healthy, no signs of frostbite. Their ears were intact. By some miracle they'd survived without permanent damage. But someone had abandoned them. Someone had left these beautiful, valuable puppies out in a blizzard to die. The thought made her furious. Who would do this? She asked them. Who would throw you away like garbage? Neither puppy had an answer. Bear just yawned, showing tiny white teeth and a pink tongue. Scout rested her head on Margaret's knee and closed her eyes. Margaret made beds for them out of old blankets arranged in a large cardboard box near the fireplace. She placed them both inside, tucking the blankets around them. They curled up together instantly, fitting against each other like puzzle pieces. Within seconds, they were asleep. Deep, exhausted, safe sleep. Margaret watched them for a long time. The fire crackled, the wind howled. The old farmhouse creaked and settled around her. She thought about Tom, about how much he would have loved these puppies. He'd always said their house was too quiet without the sound of a dog's feet on the wooden floors. She'd been alone for 2 years now since the heart attack took him. 2 long years of silence and emptiness, and wondering what she was still doing here. But tonight, listening to the soft snoring of 2 sleeping puppies, Margaret didn't feel alone. She felt needed. She felt purpose stirring in her chest, something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was. She finally allowed herself to sleep around 2 in the morning, curling up on the couch with Tom's blanket, one hand trailing down to rest on the edge of the puppy's box, just to make sure they were still there, still real, still breathing. The pounding started at dawn. Margaret jerked awake, her heart hammering. For a confused moment she didn't know where she was. The pounding came again, loud, aggressive, fists on wood. Then a voice, amplified and distorted. "This is the Pinewood County Sheriff's Department. Open the door. Open the door now." Margaret scrambled off the couch, her mind racing. Sheriff's Department? Why would they be here? The puppies woke up too, startled by the noise. Bear started barking, a high-pitched puppy bark that would have been cute under any other circumstances. Scout whimpered and tried to burrow deeper into the blankets. Margaret stumbled to the window and looked out. What she saw made her blood run cold. Her property was surrounded. 3 sheriff's vehicles, their lights flashing red and blue against the white snow. 2 dark SUVs with government plates. And behind them, barely visible through the morning fog, a helicopter. An actual helicopter sitting in her back pasture like this was some kind of military operation. Men in tactical gear were positioned around her house. She could see rifles, body armor. This wasn't a wellness check. This was a raid. "Mum, we need you to open the door immediately," the amplified voice repeated. "This is not a request." Margaret's hands shook as she walked to her front door. She was 68 years old. She'd lived in this house for 40 years. She'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. And now her home was surrounded by armed officers like she was some kind of dangerous criminal. None of this made sense. She unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. Cold morning air rushed in, along with the mechanical sound of the helicopter's rotors still spinning down. A tall man in a sheriff's uniform stood on her porch. She recognized him. Sheriff James Coleman. She'd known him since he was a boy. His mother used to bring him to the church bake sales. James? Her voice came out small and confused. What's going on? What's happened? Sheriff Coleman's face was grim. Professional. Mom, I need you to step outside, please. I don't understand. Why are all these people here? We'll explain everything, but first I need you to come with me. His eyes moved past her, scanning her living room. Are you alone in the house? Of course I'm alone. I'm always alone. She hated how that sounded. How pathetic. No animals inside? Margaret's confusion deepened. Animals? I found 2 puppies last night. In the storm. They were freezing, so I brought them inside. That's not illegal, is it? James, you're scaring me. Something changed in Sheriff Coleman's expression. His professional mask cracked for just a second, and what Margaret saw underneath looked like fear. You found puppies? German shepherds? Yes, right on my porch. Someone must have abandoned them. I saved their lives. She felt a flash of defensive anger. If this is about licensing or something, I was going to take them to the vet first thing Monday morning. I need to see them. Right now. James, what is this about? Please, Mrs. Hartley, let me inside. Margaret had known James Coleman since he was 8 years old. She'd watched him grow up, attended his wedding, sent flowers when his first child was born. The fear in his eyes convinced her more than the guns outside. She stepped back and opened the door. Coleman entered slowly, like he was walking into a crime scene. 2 more officers followed him, a woman and a younger man Margaret didn't recognize. They all wore expressions of intense focus. All of them had their hands near their weapons. Coleman walked to the fireplace where the box of puppies sat. Bear and Scout, startled by all the strangers, huddled together in the corner of their box. Coleman stared at them for a long moment. Then he pulled out his radio. Control, this is Coleman. Subjects are here, both of them, alive and apparently healthy. He paused, listening to a response Margaret couldn't hear. Affirmative. Securing the scene now. Margaret's patience snapped. James Coleman, you tell me what's going on right now, or I'm calling my lawyer. You're in my house without a warrant, scaring me half to death, and you won't tell me why. Coleman turned to face her. He looked tired, older than his 40-something years. Mrs. Hartley, I need you to come down to the station with us. I'm not going anywhere until you explain what this is about. Those puppies, Coleman said, pointing to the box. You said you found them last night. Yes, around 9 o'clock. They were freezing to death on my porch. Did you see who left them? Any vehicles? Any people? Of course not. The blizzard was so bad I could barely see my own porch. I just heard them crying and I brought them inside. That's all. That's everything. Margaret wrapped her arms around herself. She was still in her nightgown and robe. She felt vulnerable, exposed. Please, just tell me what's happening. Coleman exchanged a look with the female officer. Some silent communication passed between them. Then he turned back to Margaret. Those aren't ordinary puppies, Mrs. Hartley. They were stolen 3 days ago from a federal K-9 training facility in Wyoming. The facility specializes in breeding elite detection dogs for law enforcement and military use. German shepherds from championship bloodlines. Margaret felt the words wash over her but couldn't quite process them. Stolen. But they're just puppies. These particular puppies, Coleman continued, his voice grave, are worth approximately $300,000 each. The number hung in the air. $600,000, sitting in a cardboard box by her fireplace. That's impossible, Margaret whispered. Their parents are 2 of the most accomplished K-9s in the country. The female officer spoke up for the first time. The father, a dog named Atlas, has been responsible for finding over $2 million in illegal drugs and has tracked down 3 missing children. The mother, Freya, is a bomb detection specialist who saved countless lives. Their puppies are bred specifically to inherit those abilities. They're tested, evaluated, and matched with handlers before they're even born. These two, she gestured to Bear and Scout, were already assigned. They had handlers waiting for them. Margaret looked at the puppies. They looked back at her with innocent eyes. Bear yawned. Scout sneezed. They were just babies. But apparently they were $600,000 babies. When the puppies were stolen, Coleman said, 2 security guards were killed. Shot execution style. This isn't just a theft case, Mrs. Hartley. It's a double homicide. The room tilted. Margaret reached out to steady herself against the wall. I would never. I just found them. We know. Coleman's voice softened. We know you didn't steal them, but we need your help. We need you to come to the station and tell us everything, every detail, what time you found them, what condition they were in, if you heard anything, saw anything, anything at all. I already told you everything. There's nothing else. Sometimes people remember details they don't realize are important, and there's someone else who needs to talk to you. A federal agent. This investigation involves multiple agencies now. Margaret looked at the puppies again. Someone had killed 2 people for them. Someone had stolen them from a high-security facility. And then someone had left them on her porch to die in a blizzard. Why her porch? Why her house? Was it random? Or had someone chosen her specifically? A darker thought occurred to her. Am I in danger? Whoever did this, do they know the puppies are here? We're taking every precaution, the female officer assured her. But that's another reason we need you to come with us. We need to get you somewhere safe while we process the scene here. Process the scene? This is my home, not a crime scene. Any place that's connected to this investigation is a crime scene. Coleman said, I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Margaret felt her world spinning out of control. Yesterday she'd been a lonely widow, marking time in an empty house. Today she was caught in a federal investigation involving murder and stolen dogs worth more than her entire farm. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But the officers in her living room were real. The helicopter outside was real. And the 2 tiny puppies who'd somehow stumbled into her life and turned everything upside down, they were definitely real. Can I get dressed first? Her voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Of course, Officer Reeves will accompany you. Standard procedure. The female officer, Reeves, followed Margaret to her bedroom. She stood in the doorway, giving Margaret privacy while still keeping her in sight. Margaret pulled on jeans and a warm sweater with shaking hands. Her mind kept circling back to the same thought. 2 people were dead. Someone had killed 2 people to steal those puppies, and then they'd abandoned them, left them to die. What kind of person does that? She thought about Bear and Scout, sleeping peacefully in their box just hours ago. She'd named them. She'd saved them. She'd promised them they were home. But they weren't hers. They never had been. They belonged to handlers she'd never met. They were bred for a purpose she couldn't provide. She'd been a temporary stop in their journey, nothing more. Why did that hurt so much? When she came back to the living room, a new person had arrived. A man in his 40s wearing a dark suit and a badge clipped to his belt. FBI, the badge read. Special Agent Marcus Webb. Mrs. Hartley, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for cooperating. I know this is overwhelming. His handshake was firm, professional. His eyes were sharp, constantly moving, taking in everything. This was a man who missed nothing. Let's get you to the station, he said. We have a lot to discuss. As they led her outside, Margaret looked back at her living room, at the fireplace where she'd warmed 2 dying puppies back to life, at the box where they'd slept. An officer was carefully lifting Bear out of the box, wrapping him in a blanket. Another officer did the same with Scout. "Wait," Margaret said. "Where are they going?" "To a veterinarian," Agent Webb explained. "They need to be examined, checked for injuries or illness. They've been through a trauma." "Will they be okay?" She hated how desperate she sounded. "They're in good hands, I promise." Margaret watched as they carried her puppies. No, not her puppies, the puppies, out to one of the SUVs. Scout looked back over the officer's shoulder, those dark eyes finding Margaret's. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then Scout was placed in a transport crate and the door closed. "Mrs. Hartley," Coleman said gently, "it's time to go." The drive to the sheriff's station took 15 minutes. Margaret sat in the back of Coleman's patrol car, watching Pinewood roll past her window, the little coffee shop where she had breakfast every Sunday, the library where she volunteered, the park where she'd walked Duke every evening. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. Her quiet life had been shattered in less than 12 hours. At the station, they led her to a small interview room. It had a table, 3 chairs, and a mirror that Margaret knew was probably one-way glass. She'd seen enough crime shows. Agent Webb sat across from her. Coleman stood by the door. A recording device was placed on the table. "I'm going to record this," Webb said. "For the investigation, is that okay?" Margaret nodded. What choice did she have? "Please state your name for the record." "Margaret Ann Hartley." "Thank you. Mrs. Hartley, I'm going to ask you to walk me through last night. Start from the beginning. What time did you first hear the puppies?" And so she told it. All of it. The sound of whimpering through the storm. Opening her door. Finding them frozen and dying. Bringing them inside. Warming them by the fire. Feeding them. Naming them. Every detail she could remember. Webb listened without interrupting. He took notes in a small leather notebook. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You said the storm was severe. Visibility was near 0. "Yes. So whoever left those puppies on your porch did it during a blizzard. They either drove there in dangerous conditions or walked there, which means it wasn't random. They chose your house specifically." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. "But why? I don't know anyone who would do something like this. I don't have enemies. I barely even have friends anymore." "Tell me about your property. Is it isolated?" "Very. My nearest neighbor is almost a mile away. The road to my house isn't even plowed regularly in winter. Most people don't even know it's there. So it would be a good place to hide something. Or get rid of something." The words hit like a physical blow. "You think they left those puppies there to die on purpose, not because they were abandoning them, but because it was a good place to dispose of evidence." "It's a working theory." Webb's voice was calm. Clinical. He dealt with evil every day. This was just another case to him. But to Margaret, it was her life being dissected on a table. "The puppies were stolen from the Wyoming facility 3 days ago." Webb continued. "That's a 10-hour drive from here in good conditions, longer in a storm. We've been tracking reports of suspicious vehicles, unidentified men, anything that might lead us to the thieves. But they've been ghosts until now. I don't understand how I can help you. I told you everything I know." "You can help us by understanding the danger you might be in. The people who stole those dogs are part of a sophisticated criminal network. They steal high-value canines and sell them on the black market. International buyers pay enormous sums for dogs with proven bloodlines and training potential. But something went wrong this time. Maybe they realized the heat was too intense. Maybe they had a falling out. Maybe they panicked. For whatever reason, they decided to get rid of the evidence." "The puppies." "Yes, but they didn't count on someone finding them alive. They didn't count on you, Mrs. Hartley. Which means they have a problem. You're a witness. You might have seen something, heard something, even if you don't realize it." Margaret's mouth went dry. "Are you saying they might come after me?" "We're saying we need to take every precaution." Sheriff Coleman finally spoke from his position by the door. "Margaret, I've known you my whole life. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. But these people, they're dangerous. They've already killed twice. We need you to stay somewhere safe until we can locate and apprehend them." "Safe? Where exactly is safe?" "We have options. A hotel in a different county under police protection. Or a safe house, just for a few days while we work the case." Margaret thought of her farmhouse, her home, the place where she'd lived with Tom, where she'd raised dogs and grown old and tried to figure out how to keep existing after he was gone. The idea of leaving it, even for a few days, felt like betrayal. But the idea of dangerous men showing up at her door looking for $600,000 worth of stolen puppies that were no longer there, that felt worse. What about Bear and Scout? She couldn't stop herself from asking. What happens to them now? Agent Webb's expression softened for the first time. "They're going back to the facility, back to their training program. They'll be paired with their assigned handlers, and they'll grow up to be exactly what they were bred to be. Heroes, lifesavers. Because of you," Coleman added. "If you hadn't found them, if you hadn't brought them inside and saved their lives, they'd be dead right now. 2 more victims of this crime, but they're not. They're alive because of you." Margaret felt tears prickling at her eyes. She'd had them for less than 12 hours. She'd saved their lives, named them, promised them a home. And now they were gone. Back to their real purpose, their real lives. She was just a footnote in their story. The old woman who found them in the snow. But that wasn't quite true, was it? She'd been more than that. For one night, in the warmth of her living room by the fire, she'd been exactly what they needed. A safe harbor in a storm. Sometimes that's all we're meant to be for each other. Not forever, just for the moment when it matters most. "I'll go to the hotel," Margaret said quietly. "I'll do whatever you need me to do." Agent Webb nodded. "Thank you. We'll have officers posted outside your room at all times. You won't be alone." But as they led her out of the interview room and toward a waiting vehicle that would take her to some anonymous hotel in some anonymous town, Margaret had never felt more alone in her life. The puppies were gone. Her home was a crime scene. And somewhere out there, dangerous men were looking for what she'd found. She'd opened her door in a blizzard to save 2 dying puppies. It had seemed like the right thing to do, the only thing to do. But that one moment of compassion had pulled her into a nightmare she didn't understand and couldn't escape. As the car pulled away from the station, Margaret looked back at the building. She wondered if she'd ever see her home again. She wondered if Bear and Scout would remember her. She wondered how her quiet, lonely life had become so complicated so fast. The snow was falling again, soft and gentle this time. Not a blizzard, just winter doing what winter does, covering everything, making it all look clean and new. But underneath the snow, Margaret knew, the world was just as messy and dangerous as ever. And she was right in the middle of it. If this story has moved you so far, please take a moment to subscribe. Because what happens next, the truth about who left those puppies and why, will change everything Margaret thought she knew. Stay with us. The hotel room was beige. Everything was beige. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige curtains that didn't quite block out the parking lot lights. Margaret sat on the edge of the too-soft bed and stared at the television she hadn't turned on. A deputy whose name she'd already forgotten sat outside her door. For her protection, they said. But it felt more like she was the prisoner. It had been 6 hours since they'd brought her here. 6 hours of sitting in silence, replaying the same scene over and over in her mind. The sound of whimpering through the storm. Opening her door, finding Bear and Scout frozen and dying on her porch. She'd saved them. She'd done a good thing. So why did it feel like her entire life was falling apart? A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "Mrs. Hartley, it's Agent Webb. May I come in?" Margaret stood, smoothed down her sweater even though it didn't need smoothing, and opened the door. Webb entered, followed by Sheriff Coleman and a woman Margaret hadn't seen before. She was younger, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. She wore tactical pants and a jacket with ATF printed across the back in yellow letters. "Mrs. Hartley, this is Special Agent Lisa Chen with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives," Webb said. "She's been tracking the organization responsible for the theft." "Organization?" Margaret's voice cracked. "I thought it was just thieves who stole dogs." "It's much bigger than that." Chen's voice was clipped, professional. She pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen a few times before turning it to face Margaret. "This is Victor Frost. He uses multiple aliases, but Frost is the name that keeps coming up in our investigation." The man on the screen was in his 50s, with pale skin, ice-blue eyes, and silver hair slicked back from a sharp, angular face. He looked like he should be running a corporation, not a criminal enterprise. He wore an expensive suit in the photo. He was smiling. It was the coldest smile Margaret had ever seen. "Frost has been operating for almost 7 years. Chen continued. "His network specializes in high-value theft, not jewelry or art, animals, specifically elite working dogs, police canines, military dogs, search and rescue animals, championship breeding stock. He's stolen over 50 dogs that we know of, sold them to buyers in Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, anywhere someone will pay top dollar for an animal with proven genetics and training potential." "50 dogs?" Margaret whispered. "That's just what we can confirm. We think the real number is much higher." Chen swiped to another image. This one showed a sprawling facility with chain-link fencing and multiple buildings. "This is the Rocky Mountain K9 Training Center in Wyoming. It's one of the premier breeding and training facilities in the country. Government contracts, private clients, the best of the best. 3 nights ago, Frost's team hit it." She swiped again. The new image made Margaret's stomach turn. 2 bodies under yellow tarps, crime scene markers everywhere, blood on concrete. Daniel Morrison and Scott Hughes, both retired military, both working security that night. They were found at 0400 hours by the morning shift, shot execution style, professional kills. The facility was locked down immediately, but the thieves were already gone. They took 8 puppies from the breeding wing, all German shepherds from the Atlas Freya line, the most valuable dogs in the entire facility. 8 puppies, Margaret said slowly. "But I only found 2. "Exactly." Webb took over, his expression grim. "We recovered 3 of the puppies 2 days ago. They were found in an abandoned warehouse in South Dakota, locked in crates, starved and dehydrated but alive. That leaves 3 still missing. The 2 you found, Bear and Scout as you called them, and 1 more. A male with distinctive markings. We're calling him Ghost because he's just vanished." Margaret sat back down on the bed. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "What happened to the other 5? The ones that weren't? Recovered?" The agents exchanged glances. It was Coleman who answered, his voice heavy. "We don't know. Frost's operation is meticulous. He doesn't leave loose ends. The fact that we found any puppies alive is unusual. It suggests something went wrong. Very wrong. We think there was a double cross," Chen said. She pulled up a new image on her tablet. This one showed a younger man, maybe late 20s, with a scarred face and dead eyes. "This is Derek Voss, low-level enforcer in Frost's network. He was found dead yesterday morning in a truck stop bathroom near the Montana border. single gunshot to the back of the head. His truck was abandoned in the parking lot. She swiped to show photos of the truck's interior. Margaret saw blood, a lot of blood, and something else. Scratches on the upholstery, deep claw marks. The truck's interior was covered in dog hair. Chen continued. German shepherd hair. And those scratch marks suggest the dogs were trying to escape. We think Voss was transporting the stolen puppies to a handoff point. But something went wrong. Maybe he tried to skim money. Maybe he tried to keep the puppies for himself. Maybe he just got greedy. Whatever happened, Frost found out. And killed him. Margaret finished. Yes, but here's where it gets interesting. We found Voss's phone. He'd made several calls in the hours before his death, all to the same number. We traced it to a burner phone that pinged off cell towers heading north into Montana, heading toward Pinewood, heading toward your property, Mrs. Hartley. The room felt like it was tilting. You think Voss brought the puppies to my house? We think Voss was trying to hide them. He knew Frost was coming for him. He needed to stash the evidence somewhere remote, somewhere no one would look. Your farmhouse is perfect, isolated, off the grid. In the middle of a blizzard, he could dump the puppies and disappear, come back for them later when the heat died down. But he never got the chance, Webb said. Frost caught up with him before he could complete his plan. Voss died. The puppies were left on your porch. If you hadn't found them, they would have frozen to death and no one would have ever known they were there. Margaret's mind was racing. What about the 8th puppy? The one you called Ghost? That's the $300,000 question. Chen said darkly. We don't know if Ghost is alive or dead. We don't know if Frost has him or if he's still out there somewhere. But we do know this. Frost is tying up loose ends. Voss is dead. The warehouse where we found the first 3 puppies? It burned down yesterday. Complete loss. No evidence survived. And now Frost knows that 2 more puppies showed up in Montana. He knows someone found them. He knows about you. The fear that Margaret had been pushing down since this morning came roaring back. How? How could he possibly know about me? Because it was all over the local news this morning. Coleman said quietly. Before we could control the narrative, one of my deputies leaked it to a reporter. Elderly woman finds valuable stolen puppies. Your name, your photo, everything. It went viral. Every news outlet in the state picked it up by noon. Margaret felt like she'd been punched in the chest. So he knows where I live. He knows what I look like. He knows I'm the one who found his stolen dogs. Yes, Webb said simply. Which is why you can't go home. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. How long is a while? Until we catch him. And if you don't catch him? No one answered. The silence was answer enough. Margaret stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot was full of ordinary cars, belonging to ordinary people doing ordinary things. Sleeping in hotel beds before driving home in the morning, attending conferences, visiting family. Normal life. She'd had a normal life once. 24 hours ago, she'd had a normal life. Now she was hiding in a beige hotel room from a killer who'd murdered 2 guards and an enforcer and God knows how many other people. All because she'd opened her door during a blizzard. We want to use you as bait, Chen said. Margaret turned around slowly. Excuse me. Not literally. Not in danger. But we want to set a trap using your property. Frost thinks you might have information. He thinks you might have seen something, heard something. He might try to make contact. Intimidate you, or worse. If he does, we'll be ready. You want to use me to catch a murderer. We want to give you a chance to help us stop him. Webb corrected. Frost has been operating for 7 years. He's responsible for at least 6 deaths that we can prove. Those 2 guards at the facility. Derek Voss, 2 other associates who disappeared under suspicious circumstances, and a K-9 handler in Oregon who got too close to the truth. That handler had a wife and 2 kids. They found him in his car at the bottom of a ravine. Frost made it look like an accident. It wasn't. Margaret thought about Bear and Scout, about how they'd looked up at her with trusting eyes, about how she'd promised them they were safe. She thought about the 2 guards who'd died doing their jobs, about the handler in Oregon whose family would never see him again, about the 50 dogs stolen and sold like merchandise, about the 8th puppy, Ghost, who might still be out there somewhere, scared and alone. What would I have to do? Chen stepped forward. We'd send you home. Under surveillance, of course. Officers watching the property 24/7. Cameras, listening devices, the works. You'd go about your normal routine. We'd leak information that you're cooperating with the investigation, that you're providing details about what you saw. We make Frost think you're a threat to his operation. And when he comes for me, we'll be there. He won't get within 100 yards of your house. We'll have snipers positioned, tactical teams on standby. You'll be completely safe. Margaret looked at each of them in turn. Webb with his professional detachment, Chen with her barely contained intensity, Coleman with his conflicted concern. They were asking her to put herself in the crosshairs of a killer, to trust that they could protect her, to believe that her quiet little farmhouse could become a trap for a monster. I need to think about it, she said. Mrs. Hartley, I said I need to think about it. Her voice was stronger now, firmer. You're asking me to be bait for a man who's killed at least 6 people. You're asking me to turn my home into a battlefield. I think I'm entitled to a few hours to consider that. Webb nodded slowly. Of course. We'll give you until tomorrow morning. But, Mrs. Hartley, I need you to understand something. Frost is going to come whether you help us or not. He sees you as a loose end. The question isn't whether he'll make a move. It's whether we're ready when he does. They left her alone after that. Margaret sat on the beige bed in the beige room and tried to make sense of her life. Yesterday she'd been nobody, a lonely widow marking time in an empty house. Today she was a target, a pawn in a game she didn't understand, all because she'd done the right thing, all because she'd saved 2 dying puppies. Was this fair? No. Was this what she wanted? No, but was it happening anyway? Yes, the universe didn't care about fair. Tom had taught her that when the heart attack took him at 63. Healthy one day, dead the next. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. Fair had nothing to do with it. She thought about what Webb had said. The handler in Oregon with a wife and 2 kids. That man had done his job. He'd tried to stop Frost, and he died for it. His family had paid the price for his courage. Could Margaret live with herself if she said no? If she hid in this beige room while Frost continued killing? While more dogs were stolen? While more people died? She thought about Bear and Scout, about how they'd curled up together in their box, safe and warm, trusting her completely. They were alive because she'd acted, because she'd opened her door despite the storm. They'd grow up now. They'd become what they were meant to be. Search and rescue dogs, lifesavers, heroes, because of one night, one decision, one act of courage. Maybe that's what this was. Another door she had to open despite the storm. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat in the stiff hotel chair and watched the clock tick toward dawn. At 0500 hours, she called Agent Webb's cell phone number. He'd written it on a card and told her to call any time. He answered on the first ring. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll be your bait." The return to her farmhouse felt surreal. Margaret rode in the back of an unmarked SUV driven by Agent Chen, with Coleman following in his patrol car. The sun was just rising over the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like driving toward a battlefield. "We've already set up the perimeter," Chen explained as they turned onto Margaret's long driveway. You won't see most of it, that's the point. But trust me, you're surrounded by the best tactical team in the state. As they pulled up to the house, Margaret could see changes. Subtle, but there if you knew where to look. A van parked down the road that hadn't been there before. Fresh tire tracks in places where no one should have driven. A faint glint in the tree line that might have been sunlight on glass, or might have been a scope. Inside, the house looked the same, but felt different. Violated. A technical team had been through overnight, installing cameras and microphones disguised as normal household objects. A clock on the mantel, a smoke detector, a lamp on the table, all of them watching, all of them listening. There's a panic button in every room. Chen showed her. Small red buttons about the size of a dime, on the underside of tables, behind picture frames, inside cabinet doors. You press one, we come running. 30 seconds or less. Understand? Margaret nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. We leaked the story this morning. You're cooperating with investigators. You're providing crucial details about the night you found the puppies. By noon, it'll be all over the news. By tonight, Frost will know. How long do you think it'll take? For him to make a move? Could be hours, could be days. These guys are patient, but they're also desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Chen left. Coleman stayed for a few minutes longer, his familiar face a small comfort in all this strangeness. Margaret, you don't have to do this. It's not too late to change your mind. Yes, it is, she said softly. It was too late the moment I opened my door. He squeezed her shoulder and left. And then Margaret was alone. Alone in her house that wasn't really her house anymore. It was a stage, a trap. And she was the lure. She tried to maintain a normal routine. She made coffee. She attempted to read. She sat by the fireplace where, just 36 hours ago, she'd saved 2 dying puppies. The box was gone now. Evidence. But she could still see them curled up together, still hear their soft snores, still feel the weight of Scout's head on her knee. Were they safe? Were they scared? Did they miss her? She'd never know. They'd gone back to their real lives, their real purpose. She'd been a footnote, a rescue, nothing more. But maybe that was enough. Maybe being someone's rescue, even just for one night, was the most important thing you could be. The first day passed, then the second. Margaret existed in a strange limbo, going through the motions of daily life while knowing she was never truly alone. Watchers in the woods, listeners in the walls, waiting for a monster to show his face. On the third night, he came. Margaret was reading in her armchair by the fire when the lights went out. Not just in her house, everywhere. Complete darkness. She heard the wind, nothing else. Then a voice spoke from the shadows near her kitchen. Don't scream, Mrs. Hartley. I'm not here to hurt you. Margaret's hand flew to the panic button hidden in the arm of her chair, but before she could press it, the man stepped into the firelight. He was tall, elegant in dark clothes that looked expensive even in the flickering light. Silver hair, ice blue eyes, Victor Frost, in her house, in her home. I disabled your security system, he said calmly, as if discussing the weather. Cut the power, jammed the communications. Your friends outside won't know I'm here for at least 3 minutes. Probably 5. More than enough time for our conversation. Margaret's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her body was frozen. Fight or flight, and she could do neither. I'm going to ask you a question, Frost continued. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. His presence filled the room like smoke. And I need you to answer honestly. Your life depends on it. When you found my property, those 2 puppies, was there a third? A male with distinctive white markings on his chest? Ghost. He was looking for Ghost. No. Margaret managed. Her voice shook but held. Just the two, I swear." Frost studied her face, looking for lies, for deception. Margaret met his gaze and saw nothing human there, nothing she recognized. This was a man who'd killed without remorse, who'd stolen and destroyed and corrupted everything he touched. And now he was standing in her living room, asking about a puppy worth $300,000. "I believe you," he said finally. "Which means Derek Voss lied to me before he died. He said he left all 3 puppies here. But he was trying to save his own skin. People say anything when they're desperate." "The police," Margaret said. "They'll be here any second." "No, they won't. I told you, I'm a ghost. I slip in and out of places without anyone knowing I was there. By the time they realize their systems are down, I'll be gone." He tilted his head, a predator assessing prey. "I could kill you, you know. Tie up that loose end. But I don't think you're a threat. You're just a lonely old woman who made the mistake of being kind. So I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to let you live. As long as you forget you ever saw me." He turned toward the kitchen, toward the darkness, toward escape. And Margaret realized something. This man had killed 6 people. He'd stolen 50 dogs. He'd terrorized an entire network of law enforcement, and he was going to walk away from her house, slip through the surveillance net, and disappear. He'd kill again, steal again, destroy again, unless someone stopped him, unless she stopped him. Margaret's hand found the panic button. She pressed it, hard. Frost heard the soft beep. His eyes widened. "What did you—" The world exploded. Windows shattered as tactical teams breached from 3 sides simultaneously. Flashbang grenades turned night to day with a concussive blast that shook the walls. Laser sights painted red dots across Frost's chest. A dozen voices shouted at once, "FBI, on the ground now!" Frost moved, fast, inhumanly fast. He lunged toward Margaret, using her as a shield, pulling her up from her chair with brutal efficiency. His arm locked around her throat. She felt the cold press of metal against her temple. A gun. He had a gun. "Back off!" Frost screamed. "Back off or she dies!" The tactical team froze. Agent Webb stood in the doorway, his own weapon trained on Frost's head. The shot was there, but risky. Too risky. One flinch and Margaret would die. "Let her go, Victor," Webb said. His voice was ice. "It's over. It's never over." Frost's breath was hot against Margaret's ear. "I've been doing this for 7 years. You think you're the first ones to try to catch me? I always find a way out. Always!" "Not this time." Agent Chen's voice came from the kitchen. She'd flanked them. Now Frost had guns on him from multiple angles. "We've got the entire property surrounded. Snipers have you in their sights. You take 1 step outside with her and you're dead." "Then I guess we all die together." Frost's arm tightened around Margaret's throat. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world was going grey at the edges. And then she heard it. A sound that cut through the chaos like a knife. A bark, deep and powerful and unmistakable. A German shepherd. Through her fading vision, Margaret saw him. A young dog, not quite full-grown, with a distinctive white mark on his chest. Ghost, the missing puppy. He stood in the doorway with Agent Chen, a tactical harness on his body and murder in his eyes. "I found him this morning," Chen said, "wandering near the truck stop where Voss died, hungry, scared, but alive. And you know what's interesting, Victor? This dog remembers you. He remembers what you did." "I don't know what you're talking about. Release!" Chen gave the command. Ghost moved. 90 pounds of fury and training and genetic perfection. He hit Frost low, jaws clamping onto his leg. Frost screamed, and his arm loosened just enough. Margaret dropped, rolled away, gasping for air. Webb and his team swarmed. In 3 seconds, it was over. Frost was face down on her living room floor, surrounded by federal agents, bleeding from a dog bite and screaming about lawyers. Ghost released on command and immediately came to Margaret. He sniffed her, checking for injuries, his brown eyes full of concern. She reached up with trembling hands and touched his soft fur. The white mark on his chest was distinctive. Beautiful. Good boy, she whispered. Such a good boy. They arrested Frost, read him his rights, led him out of Margaret's house in handcuffs while he cursed and threatened and promised his lawyers would destroy them all. Margaret watched from her porch, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, Agent Chen standing beside her. You did good, Chen said. You pressed that button knowing he might kill you before we could get there. That took courage. Or stupidity, Margaret said. Her voice was hoarse from where Frost had choked her. Sometimes they're the same thing. They were quiet for a moment, watching the tactical teams pack up their gear. The sun was rising again. Another day. Another chance. Margaret had survived. Somehow. What happens now? She asked. Now we process the crime scene, build our case. Frost will go to trial. With your testimony and everything we've collected, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Chen looked down at Ghost, who sat between them like a guardian. And this guy becomes a hero. We'll finish his training. Give him to a handler. He'll save lives. Because you saved his. I didn't save him. I never even found him. But you found his siblings, and you pressed that button tonight. And because of that, we caught Frost. You broke his network. You stopped a killer. This dog gets to live because of you. So do all the dogs he might have stolen in the future. So do all the people he might have killed. You did that, Mrs. Hartley. You. Margaret looked at Ghost. He looked back with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. She thought about Bear and Scout, about the box by the fire, about the moment she'd decided to open her door despite the storm. Can I ask you something? Margaret said. When they go to their handlers, the puppies I saved, Bear and Scout, will they be happy? They'll be exactly what they were born to be. Chen said. They'll work, they'll serve, they'll save lives. That's happiness for a dog like this. Purpose. That's all any of us really want, isn't it? To know our life means something. 3 months later, Margaret stood in her living room, which had been completely repaired and restored after the breach. The scorch marks from the flashbangs were gone, the shattered windows replaced. It looked exactly like it had before, like nothing had ever happened. But everything had happened. She'd testified at Frost's trial, looked him in the eye and told her story. The jury had deliberated for 4 hours before finding him guilty on all counts. Multiple life sentences. No possibility of parole. The judge had called Margaret a hero. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd opened a door and survived what came through it. The doorbell rang. Margaret smiled and went to answer it. Agent Chen stood on the porch, and beside her stood 3 magnificent German shepherds. No longer puppies, young adults now, strong and confident and beautiful. Bear was huge, easily 90 pounds, with the solid build of a patrol dog. Scout was leaner, more elegant, her brown eyes as watchful as Margaret remembered. And Ghost, with his distinctive white chest mark, stood between them like a king. I got permission to bring them for a visit, Chen said. Their handlers wanted you to see them, to see what you saved. Margaret knelt down, ignoring the protest from her knees. All 3 dogs came to her immediately. They remembered. She could see it in their eyes. They remembered the night, the warmth, the safety, the voice that had promised them they'd be okay. They're beautiful, Margaret whispered. They're heroes, Chen corrected. Bear just completed his certification as a narcotics detection dog. Scout is training for search and rescue. She found a missing child in the mountains last month. 6 years old, lost for 2 days. Scout found her in under 4 hours, saved her life. And Ghost? Chen smiled. Ghost is mine now. My partner. We've been working together since the trial ended. He's the best dog I've ever had. Smart, fearless, loyal, everything a canine should be. Margaret sat on her porch steps, surrounded by 3 dogs who'd survived death and become exactly what they were meant to be. She thought about the lonely woman she'd been 3 months ago, existing but not living, marking time in an empty house, wondering what the point was anymore. I got a call from the Rocky Mountain Canine Training Center, Margaret said. They want to know if I'd be interested in volunteering, helping socialize puppies, teaching them to trust humans. They said I have a gift. You do? Chen said. Are you going to do it? I think so. Tom always said the house was too quiet without dogs. He was right. She scratched behind Ghost's ears. The dog leaned into her touch, his tail wagging slowly. I can't have my own anymore. I'm too old, too set in my ways. But maybe I can help raise the next generation. Give them a good start. Make sure they know they're loved before they go off to do their important work. That's perfect, Chen said. That's exactly what they need. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the snow in shades of orange and gold, Margaret sat surrounded by the 3 lives she'd saved. They'd go back to their handlers soon, back to their real work. But for this one moment, they were hers again. Her puppies, her rescues, her purpose. She'd opened her door during a blizzard to save 2 dying puppies. That one act of compassion had led her into danger and darkness. It had nearly cost her everything. But it had also given her something she'd lost when Tom died. It had given her a reason, a purpose, a reminder that her life still mattered, that she could still make a difference, that it wasn't too late for her to be someone's rescue. Sometimes we save others, and sometimes in saving them, they save us right back. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that courage comes in many forms, that opening your door to help someone, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs you, is always worth it. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and tell us about a time you took a risk to help someone in need. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about ordinary people who do extraordinary things, about the bonds between humans and animals that transcend logic and language, about the quiet heroes who live among us, asking nothing, giving everything. And if you believe that one small act of kindness can change the world, if you believe that rescue is a 2-way street, if you believe that it's never too late to find your purpose, please type Amen in the comments below. Let us know we're not alone in this belief. Let us know you're part of this community that values courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between a human and their dog. Thank you for listening to Margaret's story. Thank you for being here. And remember, the next time you hear something crying in the storm, the next time you face a choice between safety and compassion, the next time you wonder if your life still matters, think of Bear and Scout and Ghost. Think of Margaret. And open the door, because you never know who you might save, or who might save you.